My name is Ryan Reynolds. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Um, I was born in the southwest side of Houston, in Sugar Land. When I was growing up, I never went to church. My grandma took us to church a couple times during Easter, and other than that, I never had gone to church, but I was involved with other things in my life, and my dad thought that that would keep me from getting in trouble. The things I was involved with were wrestling and Boy Scouts and swim team and baseball team and stuff like that. But because it wasn't church, it wasn't focused enough to where I did fall into the wrong crowds. And by the time I got into middle school, I started smoking pot and eating pills, basically any kind of drugs that I could get my hands on. I was trying to do. Um, that went on throughout middle school and high school, and I ended up getting good enough grades to where I could go to school. So I went to Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. While there, I was studying for a little while. I went there for 2 semesters, and I had gotten bad into the drugs over there and started getting addicted to drugs and shooting up certain kinds of pills. Um, so, in an attempt to try to quit, my first time trying to quit doing drugs, I moved in with my sister in Seattle. She was living there because her her real dad lived there. She's my half sister. I moved there with her, and things were good for a little while. I got back into school. This was my third semester in school. I went to a community college, and after a little while, still having no focus, I kind of got back into drugs again. And you know, if you want to do them, there's a way you can find it. You can find a way to do them. So after a semester there, I realized that I wanted my drug dealers back because I knew I had friends back in Houston, back in Texas, and I could get the stuff. So I ended up moving back to San Marcos to go to school for another semester, and I got back into drugs real hard again, mostly shooting up pills, and I got to the point where I couldn't do school anymore and I had to quit. And I moved back in with my parents, lived with them for about a year, and just worked menial jobs, bars and restaurants. And eventually they kicked me out because they knew I was doing drugs and I wasn't going anywhere with my life, wasn't doing anything. I got arrested a couple times, was living in my car for a little while. Um, I ended up working one of my jobs long enough to get enough money to get an apartment. And at that time, I was dating a girl that I had known from middle school. And working for about 5 years, I ended up getting married to her. And she was kind of my partner in crime, kind of the person that I would go and do drugs with, and we just enabled each other all the time. And I loved her, but we just weren't good for each other. So after a little while, we decided, after about 5 years out of school, living in Houston, we decided we wanted to get away and try to get clean. So we moved to Seattle again with my sister, thinking that this time it would stick, you know. And it did for about 2 or 3 months. But again, we didn't have any focus or any real path to go in life, nothing to look forward to. And we got back into drugs again, and this time it was a lot worse than any other time. We started buying heroin and shooting up heroin and meth, pills, anything that we could find. I lived up there for about 2 years and worked fast food restaurants, just getting by. My sister eventually kicked me out, and I lived in hotel rooms. I didn't know where I was sleeping from night to night. But through that, I ended up getting enough money again to move into an apartment. And after I moved into the apartment, we lived there for probably a year. And it was probably the worst year of my life. All the drugs we were doing, all the people that were coming around, all the things that were happening were just awful. After becoming addicted to meth and heroin and being addicted for about a year and a half or 2 years, we were confronted by a family member and told that we needed to change things. I probably wasn't ready to change at the time, but my wife at the time was, and she was offered the chance to move back to Houston to live with her family, and she did. And at that time, I thought that she'd be coming back in about a month, and about 3 months later, I realized that she's not coming back. And so my parents gave me the chance to move to Hot Springs and get clean. And so I finally took that chance and did that and moved to Hot Springs. And that's what brought me to Arkansas. So after living in Arkansas for about 2 months, I immediately started going to church when I first got here, but I didn't believe in God, and I just kind of went to make my parents happy. I also went because I knew the crowd of people were a lot better than the crowd of people I was hanging around with whenever I was doing drugs. But after going to church for about 2 months and talking to some people there, I at first even, my friend Josh always talked to me about Scripture and try to pour love into me. And, I even tried to get him to question his own faith. But his faith was so strong, and I could kind of see Jesus loving me through him to the point where I started questioning my faith. And I started, praying that God would show me signs to prove that things were real. And God would show me a sign, and I would kind of dismiss it. And then I'd pray about it again, and God would show me another sign. And so after time, I kept seeing the truth. So finally, one day, I decided that enough's enough, and I just had to admit it, that I needed to follow Jesus, and I needed Jesus in my life. And I prayed for Jesus to come into my life. And that happened 2 years ago. And this December will be 2 years. Since that time, things have changed drastically for me. After being out of school for 5 years, I started school at National Park Community College for a semester. I did well enough to where I got all A's, came to Monticello, and I've been here for 3 semesters, and it's my 3rd semester here, and I've still getting all A's. Got a 4.0. I'm involved with the BCM here in Monticello. I've even started talking at the nursing home down the street, preaching the word, and I'm involved with so many different organizations on campus, and this is just a place that I never thought I would be in my life. And it's just amazing to see the things that God has done in my life, that taking me from where I was and using what has happened to me to show His glory. It's pretty amazing.